Hola gente, bienvenidas, bienvenidos a otra noche u otro encuentro con el grupo Grite. Nuevamente contamos con Pablo Martínez Burquet como la persona, muchísimas gracias por estar acá, como la persona que nos ayuda con las traducciones y aparte aporta su punto de vista como escritor de terror. Gracias, Emiliano. Y tenemos otra vez un invitado de lujo, nada más ni nada menos que Steve Rasnic Tem, uno de los escritores fundadores del nuevo terror, que empezó a escribir en la época de oro de los paperbacks y sigue escribiendo aún hoy. Debe ser uno de los escritores más respetados por todo el mundo editorial y por todo el mundo de los escritores de terror que hay en Estados Unidos. Welcome a este encuentro, Steve Rasnic Tem.
Fernando, I summarize that he presented you saying that you were one of the most distinguished American writer, very celebrated for your contributions to the horror and speculative fiction, and one of the most decorated and awarded writers, and of course, is for us a great pleasure and an enormous honor having you in our meeting, because we would like to make spread the news to the whole world that the kind of author that we nowadays are interviewing.
Thank you. I appreciate the invitation.
You are more than welcome. So, without further ado, our friends has a battery of questions. So, fire away, my friends.
Bien, yo quisiera comenzar preguntando sobre su relato City Fishing, que esto no hace falta que lo traduzcas, Pablo, pero fue uno de los primeros relatos de terror serio que leí en mi vida, entonces lo tengo muy incorporado. City Fishing ha sido uno de los relatos más populares en la carrera de Steve Rasnic Tem. Quisiera saber cuál considera él que es la fibra que ha tocado en el público lector para que ese relato sea particularmente popular o querido por los lectores.
All right. Fernando say that city fishing has garnered significant acclaim for its ability to evoke eerie with urban landscapes. What elements of your narrative style contribute most to its resonance with readers, given its exploration of the human psyche in contemporary settings?
Well, a lot of my fiction, especially my earlier fiction, was dreamlike, was inspired in part by dreams. Frequently, I would have a dream, and then when I would wake up, I would take a few notes, and then I would expand upon that dream, still keeping the same kind of tone and I suppose the same kind of disjointedness with reality, which existed in the dream. City Fishing itself, the story, started off as a nightmare, and it was the first story I wrote which came so directly from a dream. And some people have described that style as Timism. I'm not sure exactly what Timism is, except I have always felt that reality includes imaginative realities, that our dreams and what we imagine are as important aspects of reality as the realistic lives we live every day. Certainly they have an influence on our goals and our ambitions and our relationships with other people. And even from an early age, I was interested in exploring that. And I found that realistic fiction didn't provide me with all the tools I needed to do that. So that was how I first became interested in fantastic fiction. And I spent a lot of time reading the modern fabulous like Calvino and Buzzati and
Yeah.
Borges, those kinds of writers. But it really wasn't until I stumbled upon Robert Aikman and Ramsey Campbell that I found an approach that really worked for me. And so those two writers were heavy influences, as were Dennis Etchison and a number of others.
All right. If my colleagues allow me, I have a question about these beginnings. Fernando, when opened the question, said that it was his first really horror short tale that um, was able to shock him. And me myself, I'm uh, I'm self-perceived some some kind of lowcraft expert of kind of. And going back to your beginnings, or more or less, and your dreams, um, or transforming your dreams in tales, recording the first um, period of time which the writing life of H.P. Lovecraft is divided, the dream part. Uh, many years ago, I was in some kind of flea market in New York City, looking for something. When I say Lovecraft, so I find the Decoded Mirror, three tales after Lovecraft. Of course, I bought the item. It was my first time with your prose, and considering what you say about Ramsey and the other influences, of course, Lovecraft itself, it's for me quite interesting. How do you change the point of view? It is a love, um, a Lovecraftian tale or short tales, but you change the point of view. The old ones, or the ancient gods, uh, are ourselves looking to the mirror, and you this kind of manipulation of the existential horror and your homage to Lovecraft themes, um, would you say that your prose evokes a sense of inexorable dead aching to the slow unrevealing of one's sanity? Or does it lean more towards an intellectual contemplation of the abyss, much in the vein of scholars peering into the void with detached curiosity? You look, or you are involved?
Um, well, if I understand your question correctly, I think I'm much more of a psychological writer
Yeah.
than I am a writer uh, about mysterious um, outer beings living in the abyss. Personally, I do not believe in the supernatural. For
Uh-huh.
me, the my stories are metaphors or vehicles to talk about human psychology, especially the past. I've always been um, fascinated by the way the past tends to take over our lives. Uh, Most people I know seem to spend very little time in the now, uh, which is not healthy, but it's hard to resist the pull of the past. Sometimes our finest moments have occurred in our past. In terms of Lovecraft, I first became aware of him in college when I was looking around for models to know how to write, and I remember picking up those volumes of Ballantine books, which had all the hideous heads on the covers. So I read all of those, and I was quite impressed with the idea of cosmic horror.
Yeah.
And uh, for me, it was kind of a metaphor, though, for uh, our own projections of how we project our fears into outer beings or outer elements. And that's what really fascinated me about his work. I never particularly cared for his style. I've always leaned toward a more contemporary sort of style, but I certainly appreciated his ideas. And at the time I wrote the three stories after Lovecraft, uh, there was a lot of controversy about Lovecraft as to whether he was a good writer or not. Um, I certainly appreciated the ideas and the things he had done. So I thought it was time to write some stories that were a little bit more directly uh, relative, which related more directly to his themes and his writings. Um, I've always found, in particular, his kind of paranoid view of the world, which some people say it's exaggerated, some people say it's not, some people say he was racist, some people say he was not. I don't feel qualified to judge really. Uh, I just find the stories interesting, and I find that theme of racism interesting. So I have written some Lovecraftian stories in which racism is a subtheme.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Okay. Next question.
Emiliano.
Emiliano.
Sí. Bien, sus relatos más recientes se muestran aún más cercanos todavía a situaciones reales, casi cotidianas, o a lo que podríamos llamar una nueva cotidianeidad a partir de la pandemia, ¿no? Usted dijo que tienen un tono surrealista estos relatos, en tanto el realismo no alcanza para expresar lo que sentimos. La pregunta es, ¿esto debería tomarse como un reflejo de lo que sucede allá afuera en el mundo? ¿O es una inclinación personal a contar historias con un tono más íntimo, acorde con lo que había dicho recién en la respuesta anterior?
Emiliano said that your recent stories often blend everyday situations with surrealistic elements, suggesting the nuanced exploration of human emotions, societal complexities. Could you elaborate on how these narratives reflect broader societal trends and personal introspection, resonating deeply with contemporary readers?
Well, I'm not sure how much it resonates with contemporary readers. It's people either seem to buy into the surrealism and the stories or they don't. For me, I've always been fascinated by the fact that sometimes you can say or write something which is completely unrealistic and impossible, yet compellingly true. And this has always fascinated me that somehow you can come up with an image. Like, for example, I know in an earlier story, I have a passage where a squirrel with a broken neck is walking across a park. And for me, it captured perfectly the feelings I was having about old age at the time. And a lot of readers seem to relate to that story and that image, and some didn't. I think it maybe in part depends on what you're used to reading and what your background in reading is, as to whether you're able to accept that those elements of surrealism at face value. Certainly in these times, I often feel like we live in surrealistic times. Certainly live in dark times in many ways. And so I find horror, and especially surrealistic horror, an apropos way of expressing that notion.
All right. All right.
Thank you.
Fer.
En muchos de sus primeros relatos trabajan la idea del desempleo. Y aún los relatos que no trabajan particularmente la idea del desempleo, el desempleo siempre está ahí acechando desde las sombras a los personajes principales. Me llama la atención que el tema del desempleo, las clases trabajadoras, prácticamente no aparecen en relatos de terror de otros escritores. ¿Considera que sigue siendo un tema tabú el desempleo?
Fernando said that many of your early narratives revolve around themes of unemployment, where even in their absence, the expector of jobless is always kind of hunting the characters. So he would like to ask that if is the representation of the working class and lower echelons still is a taboo within the broader horror fiction genre, because this kind of theme, the unemployment and the consequences of it, are no much or pretty often taken into account in the horror genre.
Well, I think it's true. Certainly, many of our icons of horror, such as vampires, tend to be more elegant, higher class individuals, I suppose. I don't know. I think it depends on the background of the author. Certainly, someone like Joe Lansdale writes about working class people. I grew up in one of the poorest parts of America in Southwest Virginia, where most of the residents were and still are below the poverty line. My father, though, had a job. He was the game warden, and my mother, when I was in high school, started working in the local courthouse as a clerk. So I never felt that we were poor, but it was also quite obvious that we weren't rich. And I know for myself, I've been able, luckily, to make a living writing, not as a fiction writer, but as a technical writer for many years. I wrote technical documentation for computers and for computer software, which enabled me to at least support my family and to go to movies and to have enough to eat and to clothe my children. But it certainly is always a concern. I have had periods of unemployment in my life, and especially when you get older, finding jobs becomes more difficult, becomes harder to be hired. So it's certainly something I've always been aware of. And of course, for a large part of humanity, the true horror is poverty. And certainly something that I think horror writers at least should be aware of. And most of the writers I know certainly live in poverty, and which becomes quite difficult when they reach my age if they don't have any form of retirement savings, which a lot of people in the U.S. do not. And it's difficult to live off of Social Security.
Yeah.
So I don't know why it's not more of a theme, except I think frequently writers like to write about situations that aren't painful for them. They find their pain in other fictional situations, not necessarily the ones they're in. So although a lot of writers I know live in a poverty level, not many of them write so directly about poverty.
Yeah. Emiliano, ¿por qué no vas a la pregunta donde justamente querés saber sobre la parte de la producción de los manuales técnicos? ¿Sí?
Claro.
Bien, sí. Bien, entonces, bueno, como usted mismo ha declarado, ha sido durante su trayectoria profesional, que duró más de 3 décadas, lo que se llama un technical writer, escribiendo manuales de guía y de ayuda para la industria del software. La pregunta sería, ¿ha influenciado este tipo de trabajo a su escritura de ficción en algún modo?
As you mentioned in the previous question, over your professional career that is spanning for more than 3 decades, you have been a technical writer producing manuals and guides for the software industry. Has this type of work influenced your fiction writing in any significant manner?
I think it's one reason I have been so productive. I think that kind of writing, you have to be ready to write at any time. You have to be able to organize things very quickly. You learn a lot about structure and organization of a piece of writing technically, and you're writing every day. You're writing constantly. And I found going home at night that those skills continued. And also, I think because at a certain point, the subject matter bores you, I think it drives you to write more imaginative fiction. Certainly did that for me.
All right.
Perfecto.
Bien, sigo yo entonces.
Mm-hmm.
Su primera novela, Excavation, fue escrita en 1987 y su segunda novela en solitario la publicó recién en 2003. ¿Por qué esta extensión tan larga entre novela y novela?
Fernando referred to your first novel, Excavation, published in 1987. That is your debut novel, followed by your second solo novel in 2003. So he would like to know what factors contributed to the extended gap between these two works, these two novels.
I think the biggest issue is I love short stories too much. And I was working on novels during that period. I actually started Yubo during that period. I started Bloodkin. Well, I had started Bloodkin in high school, but I did some work on Bloodkin during that period. But what would happen for me is I crave that boost I get from finishing a piece of writing. The problem with novels is you have to hold that excitement in abeyance for a long period of time before you finish anything. And I found I was just addicted to finishing things, having a narrative begin and end. I got so much satisfaction from that that I would stop writing on the novel every time I got an idea for a short story. I wrote a lot of short stories, so there were lots of interruptions. I think it took basically a real effort of will for me to stop writing stories for a time and to focus on the novel. And that's not the best way to run a career, but I've always been kind of a self-indulgent writer. I write things that I enjoy. I like having fun when I'm writing. And so that's why the short stories have come about. Some of my novels have taken 20, even 30 years to write because of that.
Yes.
I don't recommend it, by the way.
Let me introduce me a question about this.
Yes.
As a writer myself. Considering that in the States the most common way of writing is the novel,
Yes.
and the short tales is quite infrequent. You said that you write for your self-enjoyment, but I would like to ask you if you write with a reader in mind, ideal or even a real reader in mind, and what do you think about be this kind of writer? Me myself, I'm a short tales writer, horror writer. So I understand quite well what you say, that to keep the flame uh, burning. Um, so I would like to know if you write thinking in an ideal reader or not. You don't pay attention. You just write for your self-enjoyment. And what do you think about this preference of the public in the States about they prefer the novel over the short tales?
Well, I don't understand the preference, frankly. It's not my preference. I love the short story. I read 4 short stories this morning, for example, so I'm always reading them. I enjoy them. I enjoy the variety that they have. I enjoy the things you can do in a short story, which you can't do in a novel. I've always seen short stories as a kind of instrument for experimentation. There are things you can sustain for 10 pages that you can't sustain for 300 pages. As far as an audience, I know some writers have a particular person or kind of person in mind for their stories, but I've never been able to do that. I tend to write fiction for someone who I think probably enjoys the same kinds of things that I do. So I have no particular person in mind. Over years after, with a lot of experience, you learn what seems to work for readers. You learn how to create stories which a reader can participate in, whereas a reader can allow their imagination to fill out some of the gaps in your stories. That's one reason that I rarely describe characters.
Yes, indeed.
I think it's much more powerful for the reader to put in their own head what a character looks like. To me, it's much more powerful. It also gives the reader a sense of participation and power in reading. I've always thought that both writing and reading are exercises in empathy. And to me, that's always an important aspect of it.
Oh, yes. A very enlightening answer, sir, if I may say.
Thank you.
Very much.
Emiliano.
Yes.
Sí. Sus relatos no suelen ser muy extensos. Incluso tiene relatos muy, muy breves, propios de lo que llamaríamos o de lo que se llama en inglés la flash fiction. La pregunta es, ¿cómo evoluciona para usted una idea hasta convertirse en un escrito tan corto y que tenga impacto aún sin un twist ending?
Okay. Emiliano wants to know that you have occasionally discussed flash fiction or go into the flash fiction. How does an idea evolve into narratives such as the flash fictions, so small with this significant impact, especially without a conventional twist ending?
Well, first, I love the challenge of flash fiction. That's one reason I felt compelled to write several pieces of flash fiction. I think you have to have an idea which is emotional and can be expressed as a kernel of information. It's one event, one incident, in many cases, just one realization, an emotional realization based on just a few details which you can convey usually realistically. I think although I am not a realistic writer, I think realistic details are essential to all forms of writing, and perhaps most essential to fantastic writing. I think usually when fantastic writing fails, it's because the realism isn't there. Somehow the writer has not sufficiently inhabited the character, has not conveyed the specific details which brings that character and that character's emotions alive. And so when I'm writing a piece of flash fiction, I try to capture that moment as precisely I can with just a few details and with a particular emotional response in mind. It's not difficult, but as I say, the challenge is wonderful, I think.
All right. Thank you. Fernando?
Si me permite la pregunta, su esposa, Melanie Tem, fue también una brillante escritora de terror y ella le utilizaba el término fantasía oscura, dark fantasy. Escribieron en varias oportunidades juntos. ¿Cómo era ese proceso de escritura a dos manos?
If you don't consider it pretty much an intrusion, Fernando is talking about your wife, Melanie Tem, who was also a prominent horror writer. And of course, you all together collaborated on several works. How did you divide the writing process when working together, both of you?
Well, at first we didn't write together. Melly started out not that interested in horror. She was interested in literary fiction, and that was mostly what she had done, character-driven stories. When we got married, she started becoming interested in horror fiction and what I was doing, and she read a great deal. And I remember at one point, I was working on a story called Prosthesis for Asimov's science fiction magazine. And I didn't feel like I'd gotten the voice right. It was from a female point of view. I didn't think it was working quite correctly. So I asked her to look at it, and she said she had some ideas. So I asked her to write those ideas down in some scenes. And at that point, we started passing it back and forth. And that was our first collaboration. After that, we became a little bit more deliberate about it. At that time in the 80s, I was getting lots of invitations for anthologies, and I didn't really have the time or the bandwidth to accept all those invitations. But in some cases, she and I would talk about something, and I would say, well, okay, I'll start this out with a scene, and I'll hand it to you, and you can see what you can do with it. So we would pass it back and forth that way until the story was complete. What helped is that we had a very similar sense of aesthetics about what was good and what was bad in terms of writing. So we almost never disagreed on that. So it became easier that way. As time went on, we sometimes deliberately chose to write stories. One would have perhaps a male point of view and a female point of view in the same story. And so she would write the female point of view and I would write the male point of view. And then sometimes we would switch. I would write the female point of view and she would write the male point of view. And what was most fascinating is that the voice that came out of those stories was a completely different voice than the voice we would have used individually. So that was quite exciting to us and interesting, and eventually led to us writing The Man on the Ceiling, which is a rather strange, non-fictional kind of novel.
Yeah, amazing. Yes, good.
Emiliano.
Next question, Emiliano.
Sí. Primero, antes que nada, algo muy breve, si me permiten, compañeros. Comentar o decir que el relato que era, el título en inglés no lo recuerdo exactamente, pero el relato que escribió junto con su esposa para Frankenstein Insólito, que en castellano se llama Esta helada región mi corazón oprime, si no me equivoco, es uno de los más apasionados y los más respetuosos que se encuentran en esa colección. La verdad es que es un relato fantástico. Bueno, eso era solo un breve paréntesis.
Déjame que
Después
se lo traduzca.
Sí, dale, por favor.
Emiliano said that one of your co-writing works with your late wife was in a collection. What was the name?
Frankenstein Insólito. El título en inglés no lo recuerdo exactamente.
Ultimate Frankenstein.
Ultimate Frankenstein. And the short tale was the name?
This icy region, no me acuerdo el título completo. Esta helada región mi corazón oprime, en castellano.
Something like this icy region press on my heart or something like that.
My heart encircles, algo así.
Yes.
So,
y dijiste que para vos era
uno de los más apasionados y a la vez respetuosos homenajes que a Mary Shelley que se encuentran en ese libro, ¿no?
For in Emiliano's point of view, if one is the most passionate and respectful homage to Mary Shelley that he found in this anthology. This is a side note, but
yes.
At the heat of the conversation, it brings to us like my
yes.
Flea market anecdote that things that are flowing with us. So,
well, thank you. We loved writing that story. We'd always been fascinated by Mary Shelley and her story, and we received an invitation to write a Frankenstein story, and that whole idea immediately came to mind to explore that relationship. So thank you. I'm glad you liked it.
You're welcome.
Okay.
Ok, vamos a la próxima pregunta.
Sí.
Bien, cambiando de tema, ¿cómo ve al crecimiento progresivo de las AI, de las inteligencias artificiales, como creadoras de textos, de contenido escrito, en auge en estas épocas?
In relation with this kind of quotation marks monsters like Frankenstein or the Mary Shelley intended to denounce the intrusion of the science in the daily life of the people. Emiliano wants to know that how do you perceive the progressive advancement of the IA in generating textual and written content? What do you think about the intrusion of this?
What was that last part about AI?
What do you think about the AI generating, breaking works and written content,
using AI to the way AI learns from people's written works and steals them, you mean? Well, it's terrible. I think it's a awful trend. I think AI has its uses. Certainly, in terms of data analysis, for example, AI can now be used to scan the Earth and predict earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, that kind of thing. And I think the science of that is just now beginning. That's certainly a good use of AI. I think generative AI to supposedly create creative works is a terrible thing. And not only is it disrespectful to the rights of the writers who are being used, I haven't read any of it that was good. People are amazed that somehow these writings make sense, but that's about as far as I could credit them. There's certainly nothing particularly imaginative in the things I've seen that have been written using AI. I know that as a former technical writer, there are some things that I had to do which an AI could have done just as easily or perhaps more quickly, but it still would have required some editing. So I don't know. I think it's more of a problem for English teachers who have students who write their papers using AI. That's becoming more and more difficult to catch. But certainly as a creative writer, I don't know why any writer would want to use it. The thrill of writing is creating something new that hasn't existed before. And you're not doing that if you're using AI.
Yes, I couldn't agree more. If I may add a side note, maybe you heard about our greatest writer in Argentina, Jorge Luis Borges, one of the masters of the fantastic writing. And he said that as the tiger is made of all the deers it has eaten, the writer is made of all the books he or she had read. In using this sentence to the intrusion of the AI in the writer's world is really nasty, because they don't they even the most powerful AI haven't yet
Yeah.
eat any deer. So
Yeah.
it's absolutely and uh, uh,
Well, I like to remind people that there's no actual intelligence in artificial intelligence. It's really just, it's impressive, but it's basically impressive pattern recognition.
yes, indeed,
No actual mind behind that.
indeed. There is no deers
Yes.
behind the intelligence. All right. Sorry, guys, but I thought it was a proper side note. Fernando,
Pablo, ¿me dejas improvisar una pregunta, si no te
por,
molesta?
por favor.
Eh, Me hizo acordar Emiliano con Frankenstein Unbound. Los cuentos de Steve Rasnic Tem han aparecido en miles de antologías. En lo mejor del año de terror, ahí está Steve Rasnic Tem. Sin embargo, no aparece tanto en antologías temáticas. Claramente no le gustaría trabajar a pedido para una antología de vampiros, para una antología de fantasmas, para una antología de muñecos diabólicos. Es así, no es una persona no es un escritor al que le guste trabajar por encargo.
Fernando have an intuition that he would like to know that is right or wrong. Your work, your short tales appear in, we can say, thousands of anthologies of any kind, the best of the year of the
Yes.
genre. But these are anthologies by author of genre, horror genre author, and not quite much in the
Thematic.
thematic anthologies saying Frankenstein or vampires or Lovecraft or whatever. So he would like to know if that you refuse to produce a piece of art by command
Limitations.
or right, or you prefer to go to this kind of work, sorry, in the anthologies for any other reason that we don't know.
Well, I much prefer general anthologies. I I am less interested in the standard tropes of horror fiction. I have written Frankenstein stories and vampire stories and ghost stories, although ghost stories are certainly less limiting than the other tropes. But I'm really more interested in the things which people are actually disturbed by and frightened by. And those are things like living, dying, the challenges of living in a difficult situation, grief, illness, old age. Those are the things which really interest me, and the essentials of human life. And so the tropes are less interesting to me. When I get an invitation to write for one of those, I think if I have, try to think if I have an idea that would fit. And sometimes I will think about it. If the pay is good, I will think quite hard about it. I do write for myself, but also having a good paycheck also pays for movies and dinners out and that sort of thing. But yes, not having the restrictions of a theme is always attractive to me. And so oftentimes, if I hear about an anthology that has a very specific theme and the pay is just so-so, I don't even consider it.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Sure.
Your next question, Fernando.
Gracias, Pablo. My last question. Su última novela, The Mask Shop o Doctor Black, está dirigida a jóvenes adultos. Hasta donde sé, es su primera novela o su primera ficción dirigida a jóvenes adultos. ¿Cómo llegó a este género?
Fernando said that your latest novel, The Mass Shock of Dr. Black, targets young adult. As far as he knows, is your first
Incursion.
work in this area of young adult books. So he would like to know what led you to venture into this particular genre.
I always wanted to write some young adult fiction. I have written some over the years. I did write young adult short stories occasionally, which appeared in anthologies. I've always been interested in young adult fiction. I always gave my children and my grandchildren, and now my great-grandchildren, books. And I would always be very careful to study the kind of books, research them, and I read a lot of young adult fiction, and I was quite impressed by quite a bit of it. And so I always wanted to write that particular story. And in fact, I wrote it over a period of many years over with various computers. At the beginning, I actually tried writing it on a Commodore computer hooked up to a television with a tape drive, and I would over the years I would transfer it to a different format and just play with it until finally I came up with the final product, because I had a smaller press that was interested in doing it, and so I basically wrote it for them. I wrote it for my grandchildren, and they certainly enjoyed having a book dedicated to them. So yes, I think young adult fiction is some of the best writing you will find is in young adult fiction. So.
All right, thank you. Emiliano, your last one?
Yes. Pablo, si me permitís, voy a agregar una pequeña pregunta a esta pregunta, muy cortita.
All right.
Bien. Hace poco usted fue merecidamente galardonado con el Horror Writers Association Lifetime Achievement Award. ¿Hay algún o alguna colega con quien usted haya trabajado o no que sienta que merece un reconocimiento similar? Y agrego la otra pregunta muy breve. ¿Consideraría trabajar con algún o alguna otra colega a esta altura de su carrera? Si el proyecto le interesa, trabajar escribiendo juntos, ¿no? A dos manos, como decía Fernando.
All right. As everybody knows, or should know, or must know, but we know, and we really celebrate that you were honored with the Horror Writer Association Lifetime Achievement Award. Being member of the Horror Writer Association, I couldn't agree more. Are there any past or present colleagues with whom you have collaborated or otherwise whom you feel also deserve a similar recognition?
Well, there's a lot. There are a lot of writers who began during my era who haven't received it, who I think deserve it. Chet Williamson is one.
Oh, well, we already interviewed him.
Yes.
I think Bentley Little deserves it. I think an editor, Stuart David Schiff, deserves it for He's not active now, but he was certainly quite active during the 80s and made a major contribution to the field with his magazine and anthologies. Um, those are the ones who come to mind immediately, but there are many, many more. Getting the Lifetime Achievement Award in some ways is a matter of luck. It's who's aware of you at the time, who's on the panel, who chooses these things, and certainly if someone had asked me if I deserved the award, I would have said no. I certainly don't think in those terms, but I'm glad I got it, and I felt honored to have received it. So.
Yes, but if I may add, uh, of course, it depends of the people of the jury or the selectors or whatever. But if the awarder don't have a career like yours, it's BS because you have to have a career kind of yours. In other words, it doesn't matter what the members of the jury or the selectors voted.
It helps that I'm still publishing.
Oh, well, yes.
A lot of writers my age have stopped.
Yeah.
But for whatever reason, maybe I just won't shut up, but I continue to write stories and seeing them published.
We deeply, from the bottom of our heart, encourage you to keep writing. The question of Emiliano in relation with this last one was, in any case, if you would consider the chance of working together with one of those awarded or non-awarded yet horror genre greatest writer that you mentioned.
Would I consider writing something with them, you mean?
Yeah.
Probably not. I think I only ever collaborated with my wife, Melanie, and one other person, Roma Fellable. I wrote one story with her because she was a friend. But other than that, I don't know. I doubt if I would be a good partner for someone else. I'm a little bit too obsessed with my own ideas and my own approaches. So I don't think at this point I would want to collaborate with anyone else.
All right.
As much as I might admire them.
Yeah.
And there's quite a few I admire.
All right. So we run out of question, guys.
Yes, nos queda solamente agradecerle, despedirnos y preguntarle, por supuesto, en qué está trabajando actualmente.
Okay. Beyond our most grateful appreciation for your time and for your answers, and before saying goodbye, we would like to know what are you up to right now as a writer?
I'm working on the usual handful of stories at the same time. I've also been working on a haunted house novel, which is perhaps a little bit more elaborate than my Deadfall Hotel novel.
Yes.
It involves 3 female points of view telling the story. I also have been playing off and on with a science fictional horror novel about immortality and interstellar travel and Mars and grief and AI. And We'll see if that gets finished. I'm about 100 pages into it. We'll see.
All right. All
Those
right.
are what I'm working on now.
We're gonna keep waiting with really anger, you know.
Okay.
So, once again, sir, we were really, really honored having you. We really appreciate your time, your kind-hearted answers, and the wisdom you spare with us about this common subject of loving that is the horror genre. So, once again, thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for your time. Thank you for this space.
Yes.
Well,
So,
thank you. I'm honored that you asked me.
all right. Thank you very much. Stay well and keep writing. Bye-bye.
Okay. Thank you. Goodbye.
Bye bye.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
You too. Bye.
Goodbye.